It might possibly be a little too early for this because this game is supposed to be coming out next year, but we have no idea when the official release date for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to be. I don't think even Nintendo knows when the official release date for this game is going to be just yet. And this is a game that a lot of people thought was going to get canceled a while back because it was announced back in 2017, and then I think shortly after it was announced, it was undergoing early development. And then that got scrapped, and then Nintendo had decided to get rid of the old developer and decided to bring back Retro Studios, developer that worked on the previous Metroid Prime games, and and yeah, it looks like it's actually going to be a thing for next year. But if you look online, it turns out it's going to be released for the Nintendo Switch, opposed to Nintendo's next generation game system, which is the Switch 2, but it might have a different like name or whatever. But but yeah, we don't know too much about Metroid Prime other than the fact that Psylux is going to be the main antagonist, or at least that's what we're led to believe. And for those who don't know, Psylux has been around since the mid 2000s, I believe. He was in Metroid Prime Hunters, and I think that game was for Nintendo DS. And I believe the last game he was in was Metroid Prime Federation Force, which came out back in 2016. So I'm not exactly sure how many people are necessarily familiar with the character because it seems like the Metroid series has kind of went off of a cliff in terms of popularity following the 2000s. I know, like, in terms of like Metroid being popular, I know it was popular um when it had appeared back in the 80s, and when it had come back in the early 2000s with Metroid Prime. And I think Metroid Prime was after the Super Metroid game from 93 for the SNES. And I'm not exactly sure why we didn't get more Metroid games back in the 90s, but either way, um, Metroid for the most part, I feel like had its peak period in terms of popularity during the 2000s. And I don't think Psylux was necessarily a major part of any of the main entries of the past, at least not to my knowledge. And and I mean, who knows? Like with this new storyline, because we completely ended a chapter with with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, which came out back in 2007. We ended like one like story, one chapter, and we're moving on to something else. And the details about Metroid Prime 4 is still very scarce at the moment. And as far as sales is concerned, it's been I think it's been about like 15 years or something since not 50. I think it's been more than 15. I think it's been like 16 or 17 years since Metroid Prime 3 came out. And that game did like I think it did at least a mil in terms of sales, like somewhere between like a mil and 1.3 mil in terms of sales. And it actually got a pretty good like meta score because I believe Metacritic gave it a 90, and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes from 2004 I think got a 92 in terms of a meta score, but I think it sold less than Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. And like with that being said, I feel like Metroid Prime 4 is going to be one of those games that's going to do at least like 2 mil, maybe 3 mil at most in terms of sales, because because of the fact that people didn't think we were going to get a Metroid Prime 4 at all, and the fact that we thought we were done with the Metroid Prime series altogether after the 2000s. And you look at some of the best-selling games in the Metroid series. I believe Metroid Dread, which came out back in 2021, is considered the best-selling Metroid game of all time right now. And like I'm not exactly sure whether or not that's necessarily a good thing because that particular game did like over 3 mil in terms of sales. And honestly, that's not even a lot compared to some of Nintendo's like best selling franchises and some of the top games, like within the Mario or the Zelda series or what have you. Because obviously, Metroid is not as much of an attraction as Mario or Zelda or even Splatoon for that matter. And, and I feel like it's something that appeals more to a niche audience than it does to casuals. But at the same time, casuals are familiar with the series because it's been around since the 80s. So I do feel that Metroid does have name value or just enough name value to get people interested to see what Nintendo, has decided um, to add to this game in comparison to the previous installments. And I do feel that if Metroid Prime 4 is marketed correctly and they release it around a special time period, like say the holiday season, it could definitely do really, really well in sales. But right now, we don't even know what quarter of next year it's going to be released in. I'm expecting sometime like around Q3 or Q4. I could be wrong, but I'm expecting maybe the second half of next year. That is, if it doesn't get pushed back. And the only reason why I'm saying the second half of next year is because we haven't gotten an official release date. And if it was coming up around like Q1 or Q2, I'm pretty sure Nintendo would have announced that by now, and we would have seen a we would have seen like more gameplay footage. We would know what the story is and all that stuff. Right now, there's still a lot we do not necessarily know about. We've seen screenshots of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and stuff like that, but we still have yet to learn more about the game itself. And again, I'm actually optimistic about Metroid Prime 4 in relation to it doing well in terms of sales because in relation to 2025, there's not really any, big games that would probably overshadow it or anything like that, at least not within that particular genre. Um, and I'm not talking about games like Grand Theft Auto 6 or anything like that because that's going to be like for a PlayStation 5, and it's something that appeals more to adults than it does children. Metroid Prime 4 I think appeals more to teenagers, or at least that's the intended audience. But yeah, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, I definitely think is going to be one of the top video game releases of 2025.